Andrew, when are you finally going to introduce me to your mother? We've been dating for months, and I still haven't met my future mother-in-law, the girl said, holding the hand of her young boyfriend in military uniform. April, I'll get a vacation soon, and we'll visit my mother together. I'll introduce you to her, he said. Do you think she'll like me? The girl asked. Of course she will. My mom's nice. If I like you, she'll like you too, the guy replied cheerfully. Andrew's mother, Amanda, lived in the village. Her husband passed away 10 years ago. He was in the military too. Her son followed in his father's footsteps and decided to be a military man as well. When Andrew graduated and joined the army, his mother decided to give him her apartment in the city and move to the village. She grew up in the village and always dreamed of returning there. But the obstacle was her husband's job, her baby, and frequent relocations, so she did not have that opportunity. So when she finally moved to live in the village, she enjoyed village life to the fullest. She had a tiny farm and a vegetable garden and made jams and preserves. Her son did not visit her often, but she was never offended. She had lived with her military husband for many years, so she knew what military service was like. Amanda waited for her son with her future daughter-in-law. While talking on the phone, Andrew informed his mother that he was going to get married, but he didn't say much about his beloved April. You will meet her in person when we get there, and you can ask her about everything. Andrew was a lot like his father, bossy and willful, but at the same time a very empathetic and kind man. April was very afraid that her future mother-in-law would not like her. It wasn't even because she wasn't pretty, as she thought. April wasn't very tall and only had a high school education, but April had no family. The girl had grown up in an orphanage. Usually, people were wary of someone like her. April was a shy, kind girl who worked as a simple house painter. Her job was very hard, but lately it had become more profitable. Many people asked her to help them with repairs. April also worked at the factory, but in the evening, or when she had free time, she never turned down an opportunity to earn some extra money. The government was supposed to provide her with an apartment soon, but in the meantime, she was living in a dormitory. On the planned day, April and Andrew drove to his mother's house. It was not a long drive. The village was very close to the city. They bought some goodies and gifts and planned to spend their weekend there. April was noticeably nervous and kept holding Andrew's hand. The guy, sensing her tension, encouraged her and kept saying, Come on, don't be afraid. Everything will be all right. My mom doesn't bite. I'm not afraid, the girl replied. As they walked through the village, they looked at the local nature and dilapidated houses. Yeah, the village is slowly dying out. When my mother moved here, there were a lot more people living here. People were living in all these houses, and now look at all these abandoned houses, Andrew told his girlfriend. Maybe they'll change their minds and come back. After all, it's often the case that a house is empty for a while, but then people come back, the girl replied. Maybe. The house we bought for my mom had been empty for years, too. It took a lot of effort to renovate it, but Mom wanted to live here for a long time, so let her live here and be happy, the boy replied. Andrew loved and respected his mother very much. She had always been the standard of feminine beauty and the guardian of the family hearth. He remembered from his childhood how he and his parents often relocated because of his father's work and constantly lived in small apartments provided by the state for the army. His mother, crying into her pillow at night, sometimes complained to his father that she was tired of it all and wanted a normal life and her own home. She was tired of constantly moving from one city to another. As Andrew approached his mother's lot, he pointed at the house and said, Well, here we are. What do you think? What a beautiful house, muttered April. Amanda's house was an ordinary wooden house. The only thing that made it different from all the other houses was that every year it was painted yellow and blue, and there were always huge flower beds outside. Amanda loved flowers, And the first thing Amanda dreamed of when she bought the house was planting large beds of her favorite flowers near the house. Amanda was a brisk, skinny woman who could easily do everything herself. Of course, she was missing a man's pair of hands in the house, so whenever her son arrived, she knew what kind of help she would ask for. The woman greeted them very kindly. As they dined together, they got to know each other, and she talked with April. She realized that her son made the right choice. April also liked Amanda, a very pleasant, hard-working woman. Her home was in perfect order, and everything was in its proper place. It was immediately clear that she was an excellent housekeeper. After talking with the children and asking them about their life plans, Amanda sent them for a walk in the neighborhood. The first thing April was interested in were the flowers. She loved flowers too. When she lived in the orphanage, she always watched their gardener tend the flowers near their porch. Little April would always go over to the gardener and ask about the names of flowers and how to take care of them, and sometimes she would even help to take care of them. So looking at the flowers in the beds, April was thinking of her childhood. After walking around the village, they realized that everything is not so bad, that many people still live in the village and new houses were even built in some places. Later, Amanda told them that many newcomers live in the village right now. After visiting his mother and saying goodbye, the couple left for the city. Andrew drove his fiancée to the dormitory and went home. He lived on the next street, carrying a heavy bag of goodies from his mother. The boy thought about the weekend. When he and his mother were alone, Amanda told her son that she really liked April. "She'll be a good wife for you. I liked April a lot. I'm rarely wrong about people." Soon, Andrew and April got married. After the wedding, April moved in with her husband. Amanda, leaving for the village after the wedding, instructed April, "April, you are the housekeeper now. Decorate this apartment the way you want. Renovate it if you wish, and make it cozy. I have a different home now, so the apartment is all yours. This is your home now." Andrew has lived here long enough, but still the same old wallpaper and outdated curtains. I believe you can make this place much more comfortable. April slowly tidied up the place. It was a 2-bedroom apartment, and they decided to renovate it. April did everything with great joy. For the first time in her life, she had her own place. Her husband supported his wife's choice and fully trusted her tastes. Andrew loved April very much, spoiled her in every way, and with every paycheck always bought something nice for his wife. One day, when Andrew came home from work, he saw some mysterious expression on April's face. She was smiling and looking at him intriguingly. After washing his hands and sitting down at the table, he jokingly said, "Feed me, my wife." The table was already set. All she had to do was put hot food on a plate for him. Sitting down across from her husband, the girl said softly, "Andrew, you're going to be a daddy soon." "Are you serious?" her husband asked in surprise. "Who jokes about something like this? I'm pregnant," the girl said modestly. "My love, my dear, now we will have a complete family." "Do you want a son or a daughter?" her husband asked her cheerfully. "Andrew, the first child is always wanted, and the gender is not important at all. The only thing that matters is the child's health," replied April. "Well, I want a daughter, so she'll look just like you, as beautiful as you are. I'll call her Little Princess, and then we'll have a boy, too, so he can protect you and his sister. Maybe he'll join the army, like me," Andrew mouthed cheerfully. April's pregnancy was difficult, with constant toxicosis. Part-time work was out of the question, although she didn't need any extra income anymore. Andrew's salary was decent. They had everything they needed and didn't complain about anything. They renovated their apartment and bought new furniture. Now they only needed to save up some money to buy a car. It was Andrew's dream. They lived in happiness and harmony. April agreed with Andrew on everything. Every weekend, Andrew took his wife to his mother's house, away from the dust and noise of the city. He saw how hard it was for April. He saw that she was constantly nauseated and could eat almost nothing. It had even lost weight. And Amanda always had fresh food, even meat and eggs. This is very good for the baby. Childbirth was difficult, probably because April was short and very skinny. Andrew was worried about his wife. He kept calling the hospital, wondering if his wife had already given birth. When April gave birth and they told him over the phone that he had a daughter, he was over the moon. After asking about his wife's condition, he immediately went to his friends to celebrate it and relieve the stress. Andrew picked up his wife from the hospital with a huge bouquet of flowers and in a beautiful car which was kindly borrowed by his friend Bradley, who was also his co-worker. They studied together in military school and were good friends since then. Bradley had also recently married, and their families were very close. Lisa, Bradley's wife, worked at the military headquarters. She was the daughter of their commander, a colonel. They named their daughter Julia. As time went on, the little girl grew up. Over the years, Andrew and April's love became stronger and stronger. They were not only husband and wife, but also best friends. That's very important in family life. One night, while lying in bed with his wife, Andrew asked her to undergo a church wedding ceremony. She cried with happiness and snuggled up tightly to him. Obviously, she said yes. April was a monogamous woman. She never even looked at other men after marriage. She was not interested in anyone else besides Andrew. That's the way it should be in married life. The ritual of the church wedding spiced up their life. It's not that something had changed between them, but April understood that after the church wedding, they became even closer to each other. When Julia went to junior school, Andrew was often away on military missions. April and her daughter were often left home alone. April worried about her husband and was afraid that they will send him to flashpoints. Every time when Andrew came back home, he devoted all his time to his beloved girls. It was very hard for him to be away from home. Often, when he was at the headquarters, he looked at the picture of his wife and daughter and felt so sad that he could even burst into tears. Times were beginning to be difficult for their family. He did not want to upset his wife prematurely, but he already knew that he would soon have a long and difficult trip ahead of him. A short time later, Andrew, Bradley, and their coworkers were told that they had to pack their bags and arrive at the appointed time for the bus. They were leaving for the flashpoint where the hostilities were taking place. Andrew, leaving and saying goodbye to his wife and daughter, did not tell April that he was going to the combat zone. He saw that his wife was so worried that she walked around the home completely lost and didn't even quite understand what to put in her husband's suitcase. April, honey, don't worry. Everything will be fine. This is not the first time they sent us somewhere. I'll stay at headquarters for a while and then I'll come home, Andrew said before he left. She embraced her husband, inhaling the smell of his body, realizing how precious and dear he was to her. Crying, she told him, "We'll be waiting for you. Please be very careful." "I promise to be very careful, my girls. Take care of Mom, Princess. Listen to her and help her in everything," Andrew said. When they arrived at the combat zone, they realized they might not return home alive. The military situation was very difficult. Every minute their lives were in danger, and they tried to survive. Andrew wrote letters to his wife and daughter, keeping quiet about all the details. April missed her husband very much. It was very hard for her to be away from Andrew. The only thing that gave her strength was her daughter Julia. She tried to spend more time with her daughter, chasing away bad thoughts. Julia was growing up, went to school, and attended different extra classes and activities. While her husband was away, April decided to get her driver's license. Before leaving, Andrew had told her, "April, make sure you get your driver's license because we bought a car. Who's going to drive it? Otherwise, the car will just stand idle." And now April got her driver's license and could drive. She and her little girl often went to visit Grandma Amanda. Amanda loved her granddaughter very much. Looking at Julia, Amanda realized she was very much like her son. Julia not only looked like Andrew, but she had the same character. She was strong-willed and stubborn, but easygoing and kind. April and Julia often helped her with the garden. She could handle it herself, but the girls were happy to help her, which made Amanda happy too. After all, it's very nice when someone cares about you and helps you not because they have to, but because they really want to. Amanda tried to comfort her daughter-in-law, seeing her distressed condition. "Darling, don't worry. Everything will be all right. He's not an ordinary soldier. He's an officer. I believe he is somewhere in the headquarters. Just believe in him and wait. It's very important for him." "Of course, I'm waiting for him. I have no other choice. I don't know how I can live without him. I don't need anyone but him," April said. They hugged. Sometimes they could even cry together, and April felt much better. Time passed. For some reason, her husband was still not allowed to go home on vacation, or at least on weekends. That worried April a lot. She sensed something was wrong, so she went to see the unit commander. Arriving at the office and waiting for her appointment, the girl entered, said hello, and asked him a question right from the threshold. "Tell me the truth. Where is my husband? Is he in a combat zone? Did you send him there?" The gray-haired man lowered his eyes and realized that Andrew had told his wife nothing about the flashpoint. He didn't know how to answer the young woman's question. "Yes, I won't hide it from you. He is in the flashpoint, but there are no hostilities at the moment, and they are not in danger, so you don't have to worry," he muttered. April could see how nervous he was, tapping his pen on the table and saying these words. She realized there was something he wasn't telling her, but she did not dare to argue and ask him about the details. April also decided to talk to Bradley's wife. Arriving at Lisa's place, April began to ask the girl what she knew about their husband's trip, and Lisa replied indifferently. "What do you mean, what do I know? I know everything. They're in a flashpoint. They're shooting and killing. Don't you watch TV? Our husbands are in a combat zone." April cried, looking at Lisa. "Lisa, how can you be so calm? Why are you so indifferent about it?" "Why shouldn't I be calm? Yes, they are in a combat zone, so what? They'll fight and then come back, but they will bring us a lot of money," the woman muttered. April could not control herself and cried even louder. "Lisa, everything you say is horrible and disgusting. You're a military wife. How can you talk about it with such hypocrisy?" said April with tears in her eyes. "Don't be stupid. Why do you even care about that? You live well with your child, have an apartment and a fancy car, and you get Andrew's paychecks. What else do you need to be happy?" the woman asked ironically. "You were so silly," April told her, getting up from the table. "I need my husband, alive. That's all I need. I don't want the money or a car or anything else. I just want him back safe and sound." After a while, April saw on TV that there had been a terrible fight at her husband's location. A lot of people died, and hundreds were injured. That same evening, they received sad news. 7 people from Andrew's unit had died. Her husband was among them. It was impossible to describe April's condition. She was constantly crying and couldn't come to her senses. Her sobs were turning into hysterics. Julia, looking at her mother, hid in her room. She cried silently and was afraid to approach her mother. The next day, Amanda arrived. The news of her son's death was shocking and unexpected. She didn't understand how it could have happened. They never talked about the fact that he served in a place where he could have died. A neighbor drove her to the city. He offered to help her, seeing her condition. Upon entering the apartment, Amanda saw April. Her face had turned gray from stress and tears, and her eyes were red. She seemed to have lost a lot of weight over the past few days. The soldiers' funeral was in their unit. They died far from home, so their bodies came in closed zinc coffins. 7 coffins were on the parade ground, with pictures of the dead on the coffins. It seemed as if the whole city came to say goodbye to its heroes. 40 days passed like a delirium for April. She cried all the time, forgetting about everything in the world. She didn't even care about her teenage daughter. Julia was left to herself. April's grief was so boundless that she didn't understand what was going on around her. She couldn't believe it had happened to them, and she hoped her Andrew was about to call or write a letter. But her expectations were in vain. The phone was silent, and the mailbox empty. When she visited her husband's grave, April would sit for a long time, talking to him. But she felt as if she were talking to a living person. She could not believe that her beloved husband was in that coffin. April recalled how they had met, how they were expecting a baby, and their happy life. Looking at her husband's picture, she realized they would never see each other again. Never again would he look at her and say sweet words, tell her how much he loved her, embrace her. April felt so sad that she wanted to lie down beside him and just die herself. She knew that she had to pull herself together, somehow. She had a teenage daughter to raise, and now it was the time when Julia needed support, supervision, and motherly advice about everything. But April couldn't help herself. She didn't want anyone but Andrew by her side. In her heart, she hoped that someday he would come back to them. But those were unrealistic dreams. One day, on her way home from work, April met her longtime friend, Nicole. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. Nicole smiled and started asking her about everything. "April, how are you doing? Julia must be all grown up now. How's your husband, Andrew? He's in the military, isn't he? Still in the service? You look so tired. Is everything all right? You've lost a lot of weight," said her friend. April realized this would be a long conversation and invited her friend home. "Nicole, let's go to my place. I live nearby. We'll have tea and I'll tell you all about it," April said, pointing toward the house. They sat at the table and had tea. April was crying, telling her friend everything about her life. Then Julia entered the room. She couldn't take it anymore, so she told her mother what she thought. The girl was talking and crying. She complained that her mother had stopped paying attention to her and had forgotten that she existed, that she was not herself anymore because of her grief, and that the child had no idea how to deal with it. She tried her best to bring her mother back to normal life, but nothing worked. She said this so that her mother's friend, whom Julia remembered from her childhood, would do something to help her mother. It was painful for Julia to watch her mother suffer, and she hoped that her mother's friend would help her. After that incident, seeing her daughter suffer, April finally pulled herself together and moved on with her life. Years passed. Julia graduated from high school and entered the university. They still lived together, just April and Julia. April never got married again. She still loved Andrew. He would not accept any other man in their life. At the family council, they decided that Julia was already grown up and could live alone in the apartment, and April would go to take care of her elderly, sick mother-in-law in the village. April visited the city and did not leave her daughter alone, but she completely trusted her because, after Andrew's death, the child had grown up fast. After her husband's death, April kept mourning for 10 years. In one rainy night, someone knocked on the window. Her elderly mother-in-law said, "April, go check to see who's out there in the middle of the night." April, putting on her robe, went to open the door. "Who's there?" asked April as she came to the door. "It is someone you have been waiting for a long time," someone answered from behind the door. Everything clenched in April's chest. The voice seemed so familiar and dear to her. Her whole life flashed before her eyes. When April opened the door, she was dumbfounded. There was her husband, standing on the threshold. She turned pale, screamed, and fainted. He barely had time to pick her up in his arms. Carrying his wife into the house, he splashed water on her face. When April regained consciousness, he hugged and kissed her. "April, who's there?" Amanda asked from inside the room. April, coming to her senses, still couldn't believe it was him. She had waited for him for so long, and now he was standing in front of her. "I'll be right there. I'll tell you everything, don't worry," she replied to her mother-in-law. Looking at him, she still could not believe her happiness. He looked older, with gray hair, with a huge scar across his face. But he was as precious and dear to her as before. She hugged him. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she could barely speak. "Andrew, my love, I've been waiting for you for so long. Where have you been all this time? You have no idea how much grief we've had." "I know, honey, I understand. But the important thing is that we are together. I'll tell you everything, but now I'm going to go hug Mom." The man spoke softly. "Wait, I have to warn her first," April said, still hugging her husband. "Amanda, please don't worry, but I have to tell you something." "What happened, April? Who was that?" her mother-in-law asked. April looked mysteriously at Amanda and said, "It's like a fairy tale. It just doesn't happen in real life. I don't even know how to tell you." "Why are you talking in riddles? Just tell me. Who was that?" the old lady said and tried to get up. "Don't get up, please, and don't worry," she said. April stepped aside a little, and Andrew walked into the room. Amanda cried, unable to believe her eyes. "It really is like a fairy tale. My boy, it's been so many years. Where have you been? What have they been doing to you?" The elderly mother could barely speak to her son. "Mom, I'll tell you everything. Is someone going to feed me?" he joked. And they, with tears in their eyes, went together to the table. At dinner, Andrew told them that, long ago, in that unequal battle where many people had died, he was captured. First they held him captive, and then they sold him into slavery. Him and 2 other soldiers. Now that peace prevailed there, they had traded him from the stage for their companions. But he did not want to talk about all the horrible, bloody details of his time in captivity. He did not even want to think about it. He would never tell his loved ones what he was going through. He only survived because all these years he believed he would return home to his family someday. He hoped and believed that his wife and daughter were waiting for him. He was very worried about his elderly mother, who must have been told that her son was dead. He had to restore the documents and find out who was buried instead of him. When they arrived in the city, they decided to stop by the store. For Andrew, this life was different. Everything was new. He had to learn everything all over again. Everything in this life had changed over the years. After buying groceries, they went home, holding hands just as when they were young. Life changed with Andrew's arrival. April's appearance had changed noticeably. Her clothes were no longer dark and ugly, but bright and feminine. Andrew was busy sorting things out at the military unit. Julia was finishing the university. She had been dating her boyfriend for more than a year, so they decided to rent an apartment and live together. Her parents didn't mind. Andrew and April tried to enjoy each other's company and make up for the lost time. After a while, April realized she was expecting a baby. When she told her husband, he joyfully took her in his arms and whirled her around the room, just as he did when he was young. "Andrew, but I'm almost 40. It's too late to have a baby," said April excitedly. "April, you're only 40. Millions of people have babies at 40 and are doing fine, raising their children. We got this chance. It would be stupid to miss it," her husband assured her. April really wanted this baby, and she knew in her heart that her husband would never let her do otherwise. 8 months later, they had a healthy baby boy. They named him Bradley, after Andrew's friend, who had died in that unfortunate battle.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.